The airport lounge buzzed with the kind of restless energy that always made me feel like I was floating just outside of time. People rushed past, their rolling suitcases clicking against the polished floor, while others sat hunched over phones or stared blankly at departure boards. I sipped my lukewarm coffee, the bitter taste doing little to shake the heaviness in my chest. It wasn't the travel that weighed on me. It never was, but the gnawing sense of stagnation that had been creeping into every corner of my life lately. I glanced down at the folder in my lap, its edges worn from being opened and closed too many times. Inside were the notes for a presentation I'd given a dozen times before, each iteration more mechanical than the last. Work had become predictable, safe, and utterly uninspiring. At 32, I'd built a career that looked good on paper, but left me feeling hollow. My boss called me reliable. I called myself stuck. Flight 237 to Portland is now boarding, the tinny voice announced over the intercom, jolting me back to the present. I tucked the folder into my bag and stood, adjusting the strap of my laptop case as I joined the line forming at the gate. The fluorescent lights overhead cast a harsh glow, making everyone look a little more tired than they probably were. As I shuffled forward, my gaze drifted to the woman standing a few feet ahead of me. She was scrolling through her phone, one hand absently tucking a strand of dark hair behind her ear. There was something about the way she carried herself, calm but deliberate, that caught my attention. Her posture was relaxed, yet there was an undercurrent of quiet confidence in the way she moved. When she finally looked up, our eyes met briefly before she turned away, but not before I noticed the faint curve of a smile playing at the corners of her lips. It wasn't just her appearance that intrigued me. It was the way she seemed so effortlessly present in a space where everyone else appeared distracted or hurried. She wore a simple navy blazer over a white blouse, paired with black slacks, but somehow managed to make it look effortlessly stylish. A silver bracelet glinted on her wrist as she adjusted the strap of her carry-on bag. I tore my gaze away, chiding myself for staring, but my curiosity lingered. Who was she? Was she traveling alone? What brought her to this particular flight? These questions swirled in my mind, unbidden but persistent. Boarding the plane felt like stepping into another dimension, one where the world narrowed to rows of seats and the hum of engines. I found my assigned seat, a window seat near the front, and settled in, stowing my bag in the overhead compartment. As I sank into the cushioned chair, I couldn't help but glance toward the aisle, half expecting to see the woman again. And then she appeared. She walked by slowly, her movements graceful even in the cramped confines of the cabin. Our eyes met once more, and this time she didn't look away immediately. Instead, she offered a small, polite smile before continuing down the aisle. My heart skipped a beat, not because I thought anything would come of it, but because there was something undeniably magnetic about her presence. When she took her seat 2 rows behind me, I felt a strange mix of relief and disappointment. Relief because I wouldn't have to navigate any awkward proximity, and disappointment because I realized how much I wanted to know her. The plane taxied down the runway, and as we lifted off into the sky, I leaned my forehead against the cool glass of the window, watching the city shrink below us. The clouds stretched out endlessly, their soft whiteness a stark contrast to the turbulence brewing inside me. This trip was supposed to be routine, a quick visit to oversee a project launch, but already, something felt different. Maybe it was the stranger 2 rows behind me, or maybe it was the growing awareness that my life needed more than the predictable rhythm I'd fallen into. Either way, I couldn't shake the feeling that this journey would change something within me, even if I didn't yet know how. For now, all I could do was wait and watch as the horizon unfolded before us, carrying us toward whatever lay ahead. The flight attendants began their ritualistic dance down the aisles, handing out snacks and drinks with practiced efficiency. I accepted a bottle of water without really thinking about it, twisting the cap absent-mindedly as I tried to focus on the report I'd pulled up on my laptop. But no matter how hard I concentrated, my thoughts kept drifting back to the woman sitting 2 rows behind me. Her laugh broke through the hum of conversation and engine noise, a bright, melodic sound that seemed to fill the entire cabin. I froze, pretending to read the same sentence for the third time. while my ears strained to catch any hint of what had amused her. Another laugh followed, softer this time, accompanied by the murmur of voices. She was talking to someone, though I couldn't tell who. Curiosity got the better of me. I turned slightly in my seat, angling my body just enough to peer discreetly over the headrest. She was leaning forward, her elbows resting on her knees as she spoke animatedly to the passenger beside her. Her hands moved with purpose, punctuating her words, and her face lit up with an expression so genuine it made my chest tighten. I quickly snapped my gaze back to my screen, embarrassed at having been caught sneaking glances. Still, the image of her stayed with me, lingering like the aftertaste of something sweet. There was something about her laughter, her ease, that felt foreign yet achingly familiar, as though it reminded me of a version of myself I hadn't seen in years. A sudden bump of turbulence jolted the plane, sending a ripple of startled gasps through the cabin. Instinctively, I gripped the armrests, my knuckles whitening as the aircraft shuddered. When the shaking subsided, I let out a shaky breath, only to realize the woman's voice had grown louder. "You okay?" she asked, her tone warm and concerned. It took me a moment to register that she wasn't speaking to me, at least, not directly. Someone nearby must have reacted audibly to the turbulence. Still, the sound of her voice sent a shiver down my spine. It was rich and steady, with a hint of playfulness that made it impossible to ignore. I risked another glance backward, this time catching her profile as she reassured her seatmate. Her features were striking, yes, but it was the kindness in her expression that held me captive. She had one of those faces you could trust instantly, the kind that invited confessions and shared secrets. By the time the seatbelt sign blinked off, signaling the descent into Portland, I'd convinced myself that I was imagining things. Surely, I wasn't the only one who noticed her. Women like her, charismatic, self-assured, and effortlessly charming, didn't go unnoticed. And yet, when she passed by my row during disembarkment, her eyes flickered toward mine again, holding my gaze just long enough to make my pulse quicken. "Have a good day," she said softly, her voice carrying a note of sincerity that felt almost intimate. "You too," I replied, the words tumbling out before I could second-guess them. She smiled, a fleeting, enigmatic curve of her lips, and disappeared into the crowd. Standing in the terminal afterward, I watched passengers scatter in every direction, their footsteps echoing across the tiled floors. For a brief moment, I entertained the idea of following her, of finding some excuse to strike up a conversation. But reality intervened, pulling me back to the task at hand. I had a rental car waiting, a hotel reservation booked, and a presentation to prepare for tomorrow morning. Still, as I stepped outside into the crisp autumn air, the memory of her lingered, refusing to fade. Perhaps it was nothing more than a fleeting encounter, the kind that happens countless times in airports around the world. Or perhaps it was the beginning of something far greater, a spark waiting to ignite. Only time would tell. Portland greeted me with a cool, damp breeze that carried the faint scent of pine and rain-soaked earth. It was the kind of weather that made you want to curl up indoors with a book or a steaming cup of tea, exactly what I needed after the restless energy of the flight. But duty called, and so I found myself navigating the rental car through unfamiliar streets, my GPS guiding me toward the hotel where I'd be staying for the next 3 days. The drive gave me time to think, or rather overthink. My mind kept circling back to the woman on the plane, replaying snippets of our brief interactions like scenes from a movie I couldn't turn off. Her laugh, her smile, the way her voice seemed to linger in the air long after she'd spoken, it all felt too vivid, too real, to dismiss as mere coincidence. By the time I pulled into the hotel parking lot, dusk had settled over the city, casting everything in hues of deep orange and purple. The lobby was warm and inviting, with plush chairs arranged around a crackling fireplace and soft jazz playing in the background. I checked in quickly, eager to retreat to my room and decompress before tomorrow's presentation. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. As I stepped into the elevator, I nearly collided with someone rushing out, a blur of navy fabric and dark hair. My breath caught in my throat when I realized who it was. Sorry, she said, her voice laced with genuine apology as she steadied herself against the doorframe. I didn't see you there. It's fine, I managed, my voice betraying just how flustered I was. No harm done. She straightened, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear, and smiled. Up close, she was even more striking than I'd remembered. Her eyes were a deep shade of brown, flecked with gold, and they seemed to hold an endless depth. You're from the flight, right? She asked, tilting her head slightly as if trying to place me. Yes, I said, nodding. We were on the same plane. Recognition dawned on her face, followed by a grin that lit up the entire hallway. Oh, right. You were sitting near the front. I thought I recognized you. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence wasn't awkward, exactly, but it hummed with possibility, like the quiet before a storm. I'm Lily, she said finally, extending her hand. Emma, I replied, shaking it. Her grip was firm yet gentle, and her skin was warm against mine. Well, Emma, it seems we're both staying here, she said, gesturing toward the lobby. Small world, huh? Very small. I agreed, though part of me wondered if it was fate instead of chance. Lily glanced at her watch and sighed. I actually have a meeting downstairs in a few minutes. But maybe we'll run into each other again while we're here? The question hung in the air, casual but loaded with implication. Was she just being polite, or did she genuinely mean it? Maybe, I said, forcing a smile. Enjoy your meeting. You too, she said, already backing away. See you around, Emma. And just like that, she was gone, disappearing into the labyrinth of hallways and elevators that night. Sleep eluded me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Lily's face, the curve of her smile, the way her eyes crinkled at the corners when she laughed. It was ridiculous, really, to feel so affected by someone I barely knew. And yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something between us, some invisible thread pulling us together. The next morning, I arrived at the conference center early, determined to focus on the task at hand. The venue was bustling with activity, attendees milling about with name tags pinned to their chests and folders tucked under their arms. I scanned the crowd absently, half hoping to spot Lily among them. Instead, I found myself seated at a table near the front, waiting for the session to begin. The speaker droned on about quarterly projections and market trends, his words blurring together in a haze of monotony. Just as I was starting to zone out, a familiar voice broke through the fog. Mind if I join you? I looked up to see Lily standing there, holding a cup of coffee and looking impossibly radiant in a fitted blazer and tailored trousers. Of course, I said, gesturing to the empty chair beside me. She slid into the seat gracefully, setting her coffee down with a soft clink. This is quite the turnout, she remarked, glancing around the room. It is, I agreed. Are you here for work? She nodded. Yeah, I'm consulting on a project for one of the local firms. What about you? I'm presenting later today, I admitted, suddenly self-conscious. Oh, impressive, she said, her tone teasing but sincere. What's your topic? Marketing strategies for tech startups. I replied, shrugging modestly. That sounds fascinating, she said, leaning closer. You'll have to let me know how it goes. Her proximity sent a jolt of electricity through me, and I struggled to keep my composure. I will, I promised, my voice barely above a whisper. When the session ended, Lily suggested grabbing lunch together. Unless you already have plans, she added quickly, as if worried she'd overstepped. No plans, I assured her. Lunch sounds great. We ended up at a cozy cafe a few blocks away, tucked into a corner booth surrounded by shelves lined with books and potted plants. The atmosphere was intimate, almost too perfect for two people who had only just met. So, tell me about yourself, Emma, Lily said, stirring her latte absent-mindedly. What do you do when you're not dazzling audiences with presentations? I laughed, surprised by how easy it was to talk to her. Not much, honestly. Work keeps me pretty busy. What about you? I travel a lot for work, she admitted. It can get lonely sometimes, but I love meeting new people and seeing different places. There was a wistfulness in her voice that made me wonder about the life she led outside of these fleeting encounters. What brought you to Portland? I asked, curious to learn more. A mix of business and personal reasons, she said cryptically, her gaze flickering downward. For a moment, I thought she might elaborate, but then she changed the subject. Enough about me. Tell me something unexpected about you. Caught off guard, I hesitated. Unexpected, huh? Well, I paused, considering my words carefully. I used to write poetry in college. Terrible poetry, but still. To my relief, she laughed. I'd love to read some of it someday. Only if you promise not to judge me too harshly, I teased. Deal, she said, raising her coffee cup in a mock toast. As the afternoon wore on, our conversation flowed effortlessly, touching on everything from childhood memories to favorite books and movies. With each passing minute, I felt myself opening up in ways I hadn't in years, sharing pieces of myself I'd long kept hidden. But beneath the surface, questions lingered. Who was Lily, really? And why did I feel so drawn to her, as if she held the key to something I didn't fully understand? For now, though, I chose to savor the moment, letting the connection between us unfold naturally. Whatever lay ahead, I knew one thing for certain. This meeting was no accident. The afternoon sunlight filtered through the cafe's large windows, casting golden streaks across the table where Lily and I sat. Our conversation had taken on a rhythm that felt almost hypnotic, easy, yet layered with unspoken meaning. Each word we exchanged seemed to peel back another layer of who we were, revealing glimpses of vulnerability beneath the polished exteriors we presented to the world. But as the hours passed, I began to notice subtle shifts in Lily's demeanor. Her laughter, once so effortless, now carried a faint edge of hesitation. She would pause mid-sentence, her fingers tracing invisible patterns on the rim of her coffee cup, as though weighing whether or not to say what was on her mind. Is everything okay? I asked finally, unable to ignore the tension building between us. Lily looked up, startled, as if she hadn't realized how transparent her emotions had become. Yeah, I'm fine, she said quickly, forcing a smile. Just thinking about some things. Her evasiveness tugged at something deep inside me, a mix of curiosity and concern. You can talk to me, you know, I said softly. If there's something on your mind. For a moment, she studied me, her gaze searching mine as if trying to gauge how much she could trust me. Then, with a sigh, she leaned back in her chair, her shoulders sagging slightly under an invisible weight. It's complicated, she admitted. Work stuff mostly, but also personal stuff. I nodded, giving her space to continue. I've been traveling for years now, she went on, her voice quieter but steadier. Consulting, freelancing, it's given me freedom, sure, but it's also left me feeling disconnected. Like I don't really belong anywhere. Her words struck a chord within me, resonating with my own feelings of stagnation and longing for something more meaningful. And then she trailed off, her eyes darting toward the window before returning to mine. There's someone back home. Someone important. My heart sank, though I tried to mask it with a neutral expression. Of course she had someone. Someone waiting for her. Someone who knew her better than I ever could. A partner? I ventured cautiously, hating how small my voice sounded. She hesitated, her fingers tightening around her coffee cup. Not exactly. It's complicated. We've known each other for years, but it's never been straightforward. There are expectations, obligations, things neither of us knows how to navigate. Her words hung in the air, heavy with implication. I wanted to ask more, to pry open the cracks in her story and understand what she wasn't saying, but I held back, sensing that pushing too hard might drive her away. Instead, I reached across the table, placing my hand lightly over hers. You don't have to explain anything you're not ready to share, I said gently. But if you ever need someone to listen, I'm here. Her hand tensed beneath mine for a fraction of a second before relaxing. She turned her palm upward, her fingers brushing against mine in a gesture so fleeting it could have been accidental. Thank you, she murmured, her voice thick with emotion. That means a lot. We sat like that for a moment, our hands still touching, the silence between us charged with unspoken possibilities. For the first time since meeting her, I allowed myself to imagine what it might feel like to truly know her, not just the polished professional or the charming stranger, but the person beneath it all. But reality soon intruded, pulling us back to the present. Lily glanced at her watch and sighed. I should probably head back to the hotel. My schedule's packed this evening. Reluctantly, I withdrew my hand, missing the warmth of hers instantly.
Right.
Me too. I have prep work to do for tomorrow's presentation. We paid our bill and stepped outside, the cool air wrapping around us like a gentle embrace. As we walked toward the parking lot, neither of us spoke, the weight of our earlier conversation lingering between us. When we reached my car, Lily stopped, turning to face me. Emma, she said, her tone hesitant but earnest. About today, thank you. For listening. For understanding. You don't have to thank me, I replied, my throat tight with emotion. I meant what I said. I'm here if you need me. Her lips parted as if she wanted to say more, but instead, she simply nodded. Good night, Emma. Good night, Lily, I whispered, watching as she turned and walked away, her figure growing smaller with each step. Back in my hotel room, I stared out the window at the city lights below, replaying every moment of our conversation in my mind. Lily's admission had stirred something deep within me, a mixture of empathy, desire, and fear. Fear of wanting something or someone I couldn't have. What was I doing? Letting myself get drawn into this web of emotions, knowing full well that nothing could come of it. Yet, even as the rational part of my brain screamed at me to pull back, my heart refused to listen, because despite the complications, despite the secrets she carried, Lily had awakened something in me that I hadn't felt in years. Hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, life had more to offer than the safe, predictable path I'd been walking. And so, as I climbed into bed that night, I made a silent promise to myself to let whatever this was unfold naturally, without forcing it or running from it. Whatever lay ahead, I knew one thing for certain. Meeting Lily had changed me in ways I couldn't yet fully comprehend. Only time would tell where this journey would lead. The next morning, I woke with a sense of anticipation that bordered on anxiety. The memory of Lily's confession lingered like the aftertaste of something bittersweet, both exhilarating and unsettling. As I prepared for my presentation, I found myself distracted, replaying fragments of our conversation in my mind. Her words, her touch, the way she had looked at me as if searching for answers she wasn't sure she wanted to find. All of it felt too vivid, too real, to dismiss as mere coincidence. By the time I arrived at the conference center, my nerves were frayed. The polished halls buzzed with activity, attendees milling about with coffees in hand and name tags pinned neatly to their chests. I scanned the crowd absently, half hoping to see Lily among them. But she was nowhere to be found. My presentation went smoothly enough, though I barely registered the polite applause or the nods of approval from the audience. My thoughts kept drifting back to her, to the weight of her secrets and the fragile connection we'd forged. When the session ended, I packed up my materials quickly, eager to escape the sterile confines of the room and clear my head. As I stepped into the hallway, I spotted her almost immediately. She stood near the refreshment table, deep in conversation with another attendee. Her posture was relaxed but attentive, her hands gesturing animatedly as she spoke. For a moment, I hesitated, unsure whether to approach her. But then she glanced up, her eyes locking onto mine across the crowded space. A flicker of recognition passed over her face, followed by a smile so warm it made my chest ache. Emma, she said as I approached, her voice carrying a note of genuine pleasure. How did your presentation go? It went well, thank you, I replied, trying to sound casual despite the storm of emotions swirling inside me. You weren't there? She shook her head. I had a meeting earlier, but I heard great things. Congratulations. Thanks, I said, brushing off the compliment. What about you? How's your day going? Her expression shifted slightly, a shadow passing over her features before she masked it with a smile. Busy, as usual, but productive. There was a pause, the kind that begged to be filled with something meaningful. I've been thinking about what you said yesterday. I admit it. my voice low enough that only she could hear. About everything. Her gaze softened, and for a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of vulnerability in her eyes. And, and I just want you to know that I meant what I said. If you ever need to talk, or even if you don't, I'm here. Her lips parted as if she wanted to respond, but instead, she reached out, her fingers brushing against mine briefly before pulling away. Thank you, Emma. That means more than you know. Later that evening, I found myself wandering the streets of Portland, the crisp autumn air biting at my cheeks. The city was alive with energy, streetlights casting pools of golden light onto cobblestone sidewalks, couples laughing as they strolled past boutique shops, the distant hum of live music spilling out from open doorways. Yet, amidst all the vibrancy, I felt strangely adrift, caught between the pull of my growing feelings for Lily and the uncertainty of where they might lead. I hadn't expected to run into her again that night. But as fate would have it, I turned a corner and nearly collided with her outside a small bookstore. Twice in one day, she said with a wry smile, steadying herself against the railing. This must be some kind of record. Or destiny, I teased, surprising myself with the boldness of my words. Her smile faltered slightly, replaced by an unreadable expression. Maybe, she murmured, her gaze dropping to the ground. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence stretched between us, heavy with unspoken questions and unresolved tension. Did you want to grab a drink? She asked finally, her voice tentative but hopeful. Yes, I replied without hesitation. We ended up at a cozy wine bar tucked away on a quiet side street. The dim lighting and soft jazz created an atmosphere that felt both intimate and safe, as if the world outside had faded away, leaving only the two of us. Over glasses of red wine, we talked about everything and nothing, the books we loved, the places we dreamed of visiting, the quirks that made us who we were. With each passing minute, I felt myself falling deeper under her spell, drawn not just to her beauty, but to the complexity of her soul. But beneath the surface, shadows loomed. Every now and then, I caught glimpses of the person she kept hidden, the one burdened by secrets and obligations she couldn't or wouldn't share. You're different from anyone I've ever met, she said suddenly, breaking the rhythm of our conversation. How so? I asked, intrigued. She hesitated, swirling her wine glass thoughtfully. Most people, they wear masks. They show you what they want you to see. But you, she paused, searching for the right words. You feel real, like you're not afraid to let me see the parts of you that aren't perfect. Her admission left me breathless, exposing a rawness I hadn't anticipated. I could say the same about you, I replied softly. Her eyes glistened with unshed tears, and for a moment, I thought she might lean across the table and kiss me. Instead, she looked away, her jaw tightening as if steeling herself against something. I should probably get back to the hotel, she said abruptly, her tone clipped. Disappointment surged through me, sharp and unexpected. Okay, I said, masking my hurt with a forced smile. Let me walk you. No, it's fine, she insisted, standing quickly. I'll see you tomorrow, okay? Before I could protest, she was gone, disappearing into the night like smoke carried away by the wind. Back in my hotel room, I replayed the evening over and over in my mind, dissecting every word, every glance, every fleeting touch. What had I done wrong? Had I pushed too hard? Revealed too much? Or was it something else entirely, something beyond my control? Sleep eluded me, my thoughts tangled in a web of longing and frustration. By the time dawn broke, I had resolved to confront her, not aggressively, but honestly. Whatever was holding her back, whatever fears or doubts she harbored, I wanted to understand. When I saw her later that morning in the hotel lobby, she looked startled to see me, as if she hadn't expected our paths to cross again. Lily, I began, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. Can we talk? She hesitated, glancing around as if weighing her options. Then, with a resigned sigh, she nodded. Okay, let's go somewhere private. We ended up on the rooftop terrace. The city sprawled out below us in a patchwork of rooftops and trees. The air was cool and bracing, the sky streaked with wisps of clouds. What's going on, Lily? I asked gently. Why do I feel like you're pulling away? Her shoulders sagged, and for the first time, she let her guard down completely. It's not you, Emma. It's me. There's someone back home. Someone I care about deeply. Someone who doesn't know how I truly feel about them. Her confession hit me like a punch to the gut, but I forced myself to stay calm. And how do you feel about them? I love them, she admitted, her voice trembling. But it's complicated. They're not ready for the truth. And maybe I'm not either. The pieces fell into place, and suddenly, everything made sense. The hesitation, the guardedness, the unspoken tension between us. I understand, I said quietly, though my heart ached with the weight of her words. She reached out, taking my hand in hers. Emma, meeting you has changed something in me. You've shown me what it feels like to be seen, to be truly known. But I can't ignore the life I've built, the promises I've made. Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes, but I blinked them away. Then what happens now? I don't know, she whispered. But I do know this. You deserve someone who can give you everything you need. Someone who isn't torn in two directions. Her honesty cut deeper than any lie ever could, leaving me raw and exposed. As we stood there, hands clasped tightly together, I realized that love, real love, wasn't always about happily ever afters. Sometimes it was about letting go, even when every fiber of your being screamed to hold on. And so, with a heavy heart, I made the hardest decision of my life, to step aside and let her find her own path, knowing full well that ours had reached its end.